Hi everybody. So we're going to go over just quickly drama paper. So this is what your study sheet looks like for drama, and it's in the 1B study sheets. So it'll be the second. So it'll go fiction, then drama, then poetry if you want to print some out. It's just kind of handy. It will be what your quiz is based on. So quiz is based on lecture notes that are in your module, notes on the authors, the plays themselves, focusing on things on the study sheet, which is author, title, type of play. So is it a black comedy? Is it a tragedy? Is it a family drama? Is it just a straight comedy? So you're going to kind of have to identify what they are. Still have setting, time and place, description. We're adding staging. What does the stage look like? What is on it? What are the lights? What are the music? Are there sound effects? What's happening? Point of view, same. Usually you don't have points of view with plays, but if you've already looked at Glass Menagerie, it's definitely filtered and told through Tom's point of view. So sometimes point of view is kind of a big deal in drama. The visit is more kind of third person. You hear everybody's story and it's more objective. Conventions, people, situation, actions that move the plot forward. Super important. Like Claire comes in on the train and leaves on the train. If we don't have that train ride, we don't have a play. So kind of a big deal. So similar to fiction, I have you choosing 3 themes. Looking at your characters, describing them. Are they flat or round, or do they grow? Do they change? Not so much. Still 5 pieces of action on the plot. Symbols, 3 of those and what they represent, and a style description. So pretty similar. We're just adding staging. We're adding conventions and kind of seeing how all those things work together. For your paper, just a quick review. It'll say questions for applying a critical strategy. I put a PDF in your module. If you can't find it, it's also in pages 2 and 3 of your Emily Dickinson packet. So there for you if you need it. You're going to pick one of these. Formalist, we're not doing biographical because we've already done that. Psychological, historical, Marxist, new historicist, cultural studies, gender, myth, reader response, or deconstruction. So you're going to choose one of those criticisms to apply to one of our 4 plays, the visit from last module, and then the 3 from this week's module. And you are going to choose which to work on. So choose your play, read them all, of course, do your study sheets, but then choose your play, and then choose your criticism that you're going to apply. When you apply it, make sure you kind of have an idea what your jobs are, because your thesis is going to be a formalist criticism applies to the play because, or a psychological criticism applies to the play because, and then you are going to have to figure out what they're asking you to do. Question 1, how do various elements of the work, plot, character, point of view, tone, diction, images, symbol, how do they reinforce meaning? So meaning, we've said that's pretty much the theme. So they're asking you how all these different parts work together to kind of illustrate the theme. What are the elements related to the whole, part to whole, major organizing principle? What is it focused around? Is it focused around the theme of revenge? Is it focused around the idea of justice? Is it focused around individual versus family conflict? So you're going to have to kind of, as you read each play, you have secret jobs. Doing your study sheet will definitely help you focus on those jobs. What issues does the work raise? Like, as somebody who watches the play and read the play, what issues come up in your mind? Like, what about this? Why is Claire so upset? Why is Blanche so mean to her sister? What has happened in her former life? Why is Laura so out of it? Lots of different questions depending on your play. So I would go through, tour at me, and make sure I have kind of a handle on what are the important things for my job each time. Like if I'm doing Marxist, How are class differences, check, presented in the work? So I know I have to focus on class differences. Rich, poor, middle class, low, middle, upper middle, I gotta figure that out. Are characters aware or unaware of the economic and social forces? I have to figure that out. I have to go through the characters and figure out, do they know how poor they are? Do they know that things are not equal? 2, how do economic conditions determine the characters' lives? So big how. You have to explain how. That's your job when you're applying this criticism to the play. That, like you'll see in Glass Menagerie, they do not live in a nice apartment. The curtains are ripped, the windows are broken, they don't even have the privacy of doors. Like, we get it, we've all been there, you know. What ideological values, what values are explicit, explained, like openly listed, and implicit, implied, like no one's actually saying it, but you kind of get the idea that this is what they're really saying. Does the work challenge or affirm the social order it describes? So this becomes interesting depending on your play choice, for sure. So challenge, does it question? Does it ask why? Does it say, hey, maybe this isn't okay? Affirm, oh my gosh, this is how it should be. We've already been kind of looking at this. Are you challenging social norms? Are you affirming or going with social norms and acting like those are okay? So here they're asking you about social order instead of convention. Who's on top, who's on the bottom, who's on the middle, who has power, who doesn't. New Historicist has the same type of things. Let's look at gender. How are the lives of men and women portrayed? Do the men and women accept or reject these roles? That's your job. If you're looking at Streetcar, Stanley, definitely the man's man, kind of macho, wants to be in charge. So you're gonna kind of say if they accept or reject those roles. Blanche is more of the Southern Belle type of character, and you can see if she pulls that off or not. Is the form and content of the work influenced by the author's gender? So whether or not they're male or female, how does that influence their characters, their stories, a little bit into their background? What attitudes are explicit? We said that's explained, or implicit, implied, concerning heterosexual, homosexual, or lesbian relationships. You have to read Streetcar pretty carefully because in the movie, they don't tell you why Blanche's first husband kills himself. They just kind of say it happened. And they imply some stuff, but they don't really talk about it. So you have to read the play and find out what happens, like leading up to him shooting himself. So that's kind of a big deal. Are these relationships sources of conflict? Do they provide resolutions to the conflicts? You know, can you, if you're married to somebody who's questioning their sexuality, is that gonna work? Is it gonna work, especially if it's 1940 and people are very kind of straight-laced social conventions? So lots of things to talk about there. Does the work challenge or affirm traditional ideas about men and women and same-sex relationships? So looking at heterosexual relationships, homosexual or lesbian relationships, if you think people are kind of too close in the family, not close enough in the family, kind of what's happening there with gender. Myth, a mythological criticism applies because, so you're looking here, how does it resemble other stories in plot, character setting, or use of symbols? Hello, we've been looking at symbols. We have the panther coming back. We have the setting of the forest coming back. That kind of these recurring mythological symbols, especially if you did that for your Socratic and looked at Joseph Campbell and the myths, kind of give you a lot of insight into that. Are archetypes presented, such as quests, initiations, scapegoats, or withdrawals and returns? If you're doing the visit, you can see all of those, as well as Glass Menagerie too. You could look at Quest, you could look at Streetcar Quest, you could definitely look at Scapegoats, Initiation, Return, and Othello. So many options. Does the protagonist undergo any kind of transformation, such as a movement from innocence to experience that seems archetypal? Bing, bing, bing. There are so many reasons we did Blake's Innocence and Experience. That is definitely part of Quest. We looked at that as part of Siddhartha's awakening, you know, that he has this quest, he goes on, he has to experience all this stuff to get enlightenment. Do any specific allusions to myths shed light on the text? In Othello, there's allusions to Janus, the two-faced god that we get the name January from. The golden beetle in the visit. There's also kind of comparisons for her to a fury who comes back and gets revenge on people with Claire, or I think the teacher compares her to Medea too, which is a great story. So whatever criticism you choose to apply, I would go through and just check, find out what your jobs are. My job is to say how this is archetypal. My job is to say who goes from innocence to experience. My job is to look at male and female and homosexual and heterosexual relationships. So find out like what they're asking you to do, because it's easier to kind of know a job before you have to do said job. So make sure you get kind of the idea of what you need to do. Absolutely read your play carefully. And after you're looking at these, then you're going to go, oh, as you're rereading, looking for support, you can find some items that will help you to make your interpretation. So our other job, turning that into a paper. So we already said, and I've answered tons of emails that we need. So our minimum is 2 other secondary sources besides the play. So our primary support will be our play, whatever play you choose. Our secondary support will be your 2 articles. And that's the minimum. That's the minimum ILCO requires. So I say ECC library databases, that those would be my absolutely first choice. I gave you an example of that with the Morrison article from JSTOR. You can also use reliable.org or .gov or .edu websites. .gov is probably not going to help you a lot on a literary-based paper, but I also give some examples like Gale Literary Criticism, and I put a critical analysis module in your extra modules. If you go all the way down, there's a literary analysis and criticism little mini module that gives some paper samples if you want to check those out. They're not exactly what we're doing, but they're fairly similar, having primary and secondary support. So about 2,000 words. So, 8-ish pages. If you're close, just enough support. I recommend it in my strategy sheet to have like 2 quotes from the play in each body paragraph, and maybe 1 from your critical source, or 2, depending on if you use some support for your counter argument. But enough support to really make your interpretation, because you are arguing that one of these literary criticisms really applies to your play and that it's the absolute best one. For the counter, I give you a little sample and an outline. You can also, I have what I called an outline-orama, that if you need help making an outline, I gave you access to this in the documents, and it just keeps you kind of on track of, hey, here's my source from here, I got to remember transition, I have to remember to explain my quote, tie it back to my warrant and my claim. So it gives you those reminders. If you need a little help, it's there for you. If you're like, no, I got this, no worries. So I give you a sample outline here. We're talking about, Your primary source would be your drama. Discuss drama and elements. Drama quote, at least 2 throughout the paragraph. Sometimes you might need more depending on what you're talking about and how much support you need. Then support from secondary source and some sort of connection, and how both of those help you prove your critical strategy. When you do the counter, you might want to say, some people might feel that a gender analysis of A Streetcar Named Desire is not the best way to go, but they would think that a psychological interpretation would make more sense because of the character's emotions and personalities, that Blanche obviously has different emotional states that are happening, whether it's depression or kind of low self-esteem or whatever. However, gender would be the absolute best criticism because blah, blah, blah. So something else new that you haven't talked about related to your gender criticism. That the idea, of a Southern belle in the South becomes blah, 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 and that's a female concept, which he also illustrated with Glass Menagerie in the mom, Amanda, who had the 17 gentlemen callers, or however many she kept repeating. So in your counter, it's just giving you another opportunity because other people are going to say, hey, this criticism is better than this criticism. And your job is to prove that yours is the best application for the play. Then conclusion, restate your thesis, give us a takeaway, the usual. You're going to have a different number of paragraphs depending on the criticism you choose. Historical only has 3 questions, so you'll need 3 body paragraphs. Psychological has 3. Formalist has 4. And most of the other ones have 4. New historicist, 3. 4 cultural, 4 gender, 4 mythology, 4. So you need a paragraph on each of those to answer each of those questions, and they become your warrants. So maybe like a formalist criticism applies to the visit because the various elements work together to illustrate the theme. The elements are related through conflict or whatever you think they are. The work's major organizing principle is the blah, 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 and illustrates unified structure because, and then the work raises issues on what justice actually is, or whatever you think it raises. So these warrants, you're just going to answer those questions, and then that becomes your paper. So again, get ready for the quiz by making your study sheets. It will only be on our 4 dramas, plus your lecture sheets and author lectures that I gave you. You're welcome to use all of them on your exam. And I hope you do really well, and I hope this helps you format your paper and get your primary and secondary sources. Thanks, bye.